Welcome to the first Masterclass in Abstract Horizons. This session is all about building a strong foundation for painting abstract landscapes, understanding what makes them different from realism, the emotional depth they bring, and the essential elements that hold them together. Exploring how abstract landscapes move beyond simply depicting a place, instead capturing its feeling, energy, and atmosphere. We'll look at how abstraction leaves room for the viewer's interpretation, making these works deeply personal and immersive. To illustrate these ideas, I'll be discussing works by a range of artists, from those who bridged realism and abstraction like Monet and Turner, to fully abstract pioneers such as Kandinsky and O'Keeffe. Their approaches to colour, composition and value will give you a deeper understanding of how to bring these elements into your own paintings. By the end of this session, you'll have a clearer grasp of what makes an abstract landscape powerful and expressive, and I'll be setting an assignment to help you put these concepts into practice. So let's get going. So let's take a step back first and look at what actually makes an abstract landscape different from a realistic one. A landscape doesn't have to be a detailed photographic depiction of a place. It can be an emotional response, a mood, or an essence. Abstract landscapes often strip away unnecessary detail and focus on the energy of a scene rather than precise accuracy. To illustrate this, I've chosen three paintings: John Constable's The Haywine, Claude Monet's Impression Sunrise, and Georgia O'Keeffe's Light Coming on the Plains No. 1. The Haywine is a classic example of realism in landscape painting. Constable meticulously captures the details of rural life, from the reflections in the water to the textures of the trees and sky. The focus is on precision and a true-to-life representation of the English countryside, evoking nostalgia and a deep connection to nature. Here, the landscape serves as a window into a real, specific place and time. Monet's Impression Sunrise moves away from strict realism, instead painting a fleeting impression of light and atmosphere. The brushstrokes are loose, details are softened, and colour is prioritised over structure. This piece bridges the gap between realism and abstraction. While you can still discern elements of the scene, Monet's focus is on the mood and movement of the moment, rather than rigid accuracy. The landscape becomes more about sensation and perception than precise depiction. O'Keeffe's Light Coming on the Plains No. 1 takes landscape even further into abstraction. Here the scene is distilled into simple, sweeping bands of colour that evoke the vastness and quiet stillness of the land. There are no trees, buildings or fine details, just the pure essence of light and space. Instead of describing a place with accuracy, she conveys its feeling in an almost meditative way. This shift from realism to abstraction is where you get to break free from the pressure of replicating a scene and instead explore how a landscape feels. When you strip away unnecessary details, you begin to focus on atmosphere, movement, and emotion, creating a piece that resonates more deeply with personal experience rather than strict representation. It's important to remember abstraction isn't all or nothing. It exists on a spectrum, and different artists explore it in different ways. To show this, I've chosen three paintings. Each one represents a different stage in the journey from realism to full abstraction. Leviton's Landscape with Moon leans into abstraction through its soft, atmospheric quality. Instead of meticulously rendering every detail, Leviton simplifies the scene using diffuse light, muted colours, and minimal form to evoke a sense of stillness and solitude. The landscape feels almost like a memory, hazy, emotional, and more about the mood of the moment than its physical accuracy. Duran's Mountains à Collier pushes further, using bold colours and loose, exaggerated shapes to reinterpret the landscape. His Fauvist approach isn't concerned with realistic light and shadow, but rather with an expressive response to the scene. The mountains and trees are still recognisable, but their forms are simplified and stylised, filled with vibrant, non-naturalistic colours that heighten the emotional impact of the painting. This work represents a turning point where the subject is still present, but colour and shape begin to take precedence over realism. In Kandinsky's landscape with red spots, the landscape has transformed into pure energy and movement. Landscape with red spots no longer depicts a specific place. It instead captures the feeling of a landscape through colour, form, and rhythm. Elements of nature, perhaps trees, hills, or sky, are fragmented into dynamic shapes and bold contrasts. The landscape exists in an emotional, symbolic space rather than a literal one, inviting the viewer to experience it on a deeper, more intuitive level. Now that we've looked at different degrees of abstraction, it's important to consider why we abstract landscapes in the first place. For me, the goal isn't to recreate a perfect scene, it's to capture a feeling. A landscape is more than what's in front of you. It holds memories, emotions, and atmosphere. So when painting an abstract landscape, instead of asking what colour are the trees, or how do I make this look realistic, I ask what's the mood here? What emotions does this place bring up for me? Turner's Snowstorm, Steamboat off a harbour's mouth, is a perfect example of how a painting moves beyond representation into raw, expressive energy. Turner isn't concerned with precise details. Instead, the storm itself takes over, with wild, swirling brushstrokes, and a stormy palette immersing the viewer in the chaos of the moment. The ship and sea blend together, dissolving into a haze of light and shadow. It's not just a picture of a storm, it feels like one. As you begin exploring abstract landscapes, let go of the pressure to get every detail right. Instead, ask yourself, what does this place feel like? What emotions does it bring up? Because painting abstract landscapes isn't just about what you see, but about how you experience the world around you. One of the most powerful things about abstract landscapes is that they also leave space for the viewer to bring their own emotions and experiences into the work. In a realistic painting, everything is clear. This is a tree, this is a river. But abstraction doesn't spell everything out. Instead, it invites the viewer to feel something personal. By removing details, it actually allows for a deeper emotional connection. Rather than focusing on what they're looking at, people respond to shapes, colours, and textures in their own way. Van Gogh's Plain, Near or There still holds recognisable elements, feel, sky, movement, but it begins to break away from strict realism. The swirling brushstrokes and intense colour create a landscape that feels alive. It's more than just a scene, it's an expression of energy and emotion. Each viewer might experience this differently though. Some may see warmth and vitality, others might sense turbulence and unease. Helen Frankenthaler's Mountains and Sea pushes abstraction further, stripping away form almost entirely. Instead of clear land or sky, fluid washes of colour suggest a landscape without defining it. Her soak stain technique allows the paint to bleed into the canvas, creating an atmospheric open space where colour itself becomes the experience. Some might see rolling hills, others a quiet vastness like sky meeting water in the distance. Both paintings show how abstraction invites personal interpretation. Van Gogh heightens emotion through expressive mark-making, while Frankenthaler removes detail entirely, letting colour evoke place and feeling. One is charged with movement, the other feels weightless, but both shift the focus from what is this to how does this make me feel. That's the beauty of abstract landscapes. They don't offer a single meaning. Instead, they create space for each viewer to bring their own memories, emotions, and experiences into the work. So far, we've explored what makes abstract landscapes different from realism and how they capture feeling rather than just scenery. We've also looked at how abstraction exists on a spectrum, where some paintings simplify reality just a little, while others push into complete expression. But what actually holds an abstract landscape together? How do you create something that feels intentional rather than random? That's where three core pillars come in: colour, composition, and value. Colour sets the emotional tone of a painting. It's what we respond to first, shaping the mood and atmosphere. Composition gives the painting structure, arranging elements in a way that creates movement, balance, and energy. Value ties everything together, using light and dark relationships to create contrast, depth, and clarity, even when forms are abstracted. These three elements work together to make a painting feel grounded, expressive, and complete. A great example of this is Georgia O'Keeffe's From the Plains One, which captures the vastness of an open landscape without relying on traditional representation. Instead of detailing specific elements like trees or hills, she abstracts the movement and atmosphere of the plains through fluid shapes and a carefully layered colour palette. Colour plays a key role in setting the mood. Deep blues and cool greens create a sense of openness, while darker tones add grounding and depth. By shifting away from naturalistic colours, O'Keeffe lets colour itself communicate space and presence. The composition reinforces this sense of expansiveness. Large, sweeping arcs of colour create movement as if the landscape is shifting and breathing. The curved bands suggest rolling hills and the currents of wind, guiding the viewer's eye naturally across the painting. Unlike a traditional horizon line that defines space, O'Keeffe softens the boundaries, making the landscape feel immersive and uncontained. The values used in the painting create depth and movement without relying on perspective. Deep shadows contrast with softer tones, drawing the eye across the composition. Gradual shifts in value within the blues and purples enhance the dreamlike quality of the piece, while darker strokes add weight and structure. Through colour, composition, and value, O'Keeffe transforms the plains into something more than a location. She creates an emotional landscape. The painting isn't about capturing an exact place, but about evoking the feeling of standing in an endless, boundless space where land and sky merge. Colour is one of the most powerful tools in abstract landscapes. It's often the first thing we respond to emotionally, even before recognising shapes or composition. In realism, colour is tied to how things look in nature. Trees are green, the sky is blue. But in abstract landscapes, colour doesn't have to be literal. It's about mood, atmosphere, and energy. A deep, brooded blue can evoke mystery or calm, while fiery oranges and reds might create movement and intensity. Milton Avery's Gas Pink Sky is an example of how colour can transform the perception of a landscape. Instead of a traditional blue sky, Avery uses a beautiful pink, shifting the scene into something surreal and expansive. This unexpected choice changes how the landscape is experienced, making it feel warm and otherworldly. The simplified flattened land and sea beneath reinforce this. There are three key aspects that shape how colour works in an abstract landscape. Colour relationships influence how colours interact. Contrasting colours, like the pink and green in Gas Pink Sky, create vibrancy, while analogous colours, such as soft oranges and reds, blend harmoniously for a more unified effect. Colour temperature affects mood. Warm colours like red, orange, and yellow tend to feel energetic and inviting, while cool colours like blue, green, and purple create a sense of calm or distance. The warm pink sky against the deep cool blue in Avery's painting balances stillness with quiet energy, making the scene feel both peaceful and alive. Colour saturation determines intensity. Bright, saturated colours create impact, while muted tones feel softer and more atmospheric. The high saturation pink, Gas Pink Sky, dominates the scene, drawing the eye immediately. If the pink were more muted, the painting would feel more subdued, shifting its emotional tone. Each of these elements, relationships, temperature, and saturation, work together to shape the emotional depth of a painting. Gas Pink Sky shows how a landscape doesn't have to follow reality to feel real. By abstracting through colour, Avery demonstrates that a painting can be more about how a place feels than how it looks. So colour is one of the most powerful tools we have in abstract landscapes. It sets the mood, creates depth, and helps tell a story. But before we explore how colour impacts emotion, let's start with the basics, the colour wheel. The colour wheel is an essential guide for understanding how colours relate to each other. Primary colours, red, blue and yellow, are the foundation. Every other colour is created from these three. Secondary colours, green, orange and purple, are made by mixing two primaries. Tertiary colours, like blue-green or red-orange, are a mix of a primary and a secondary, giving us a broader range of colours. By understanding these relationships, we can intentionally use colour to create harmony, contrast, or energy in our paintings. So how does this apply to abstract landscapes? Analogous colours, colours next to each other on the wheel, like blues and greens, create a sense of harmony and flow. Think of a cool, misty seascape where the colours blend softly together. Complementary colours, opposites on the wheel, like blue and orange, create bold contrast and energy, like a glowing sunset against a deep blue sky. Split complementary adds additional complexity and variation while still maintaining balance. For split complementary, choose a base colour, find its complement opposite on the colour wheel, and instead of using the exact complement, use the two colours adjacent to it. These relationships shape the way we experience a painting, even when the landscape itself isn't realistic. Whether you want a piece to feel peaceful or dynamic, your colour choices will guide the mood. Colour is also about temperature. Warm colours like reds, oranges and yellows tend to feel energetic and inviting, while cool colours like blues, greens and purples create a sense of calm, depth and distance. But in abstract landscapes, it's not always that simple. One of the most fascinating aspects of colour is how warm and cool tones can coexist within a painting, creating contrast, harmony and depth. A warm painting can contain cool undertones, and a cool painting can have moments of warmth. This interplay is what gives colour its complexity. Georgia O'Keeffe's paintings here beautifully illustrate this balance. In Sunrise, on the left, she builds a composition dominated by warm reds, pinks and yellows, immediately placing it in the warm category. But look closer. Cool undertones emerge in the gradation of pinks into purples and in the soft edges of the composition. The bright yellow at the centre acts as a focal point, reinforcing the energy of the rising sun, while the surrounding reds and pinks intensify its glow. Yet the presence of subtle purples and magentas balances the composition, preventing it from feeling overwhelmingly warm. By contrast, Ranchos Church, New Mexico, appears cooler at first glance, with its dominant blue sky creating a sense of openness, but warmth is clearly woven into the sandy beiges and rich browns of the adobe walls, reflecting the heat absorbed by the sunlit New Mexico landscape. O'Keeffe's work reveals that warm and cool aren't opposites. They interact and shift in intensity depending on their surroundings. A warm painting can incorporate cool undertones to add softness and balance, while a cool painting can contain moments of warmth to create contrast and depth. So when working on your own abstract landscapes, think about how warm and cool colours work together. Ask yourself, is my painting predominantly warm or cool? How can I introduce small touches of the opposite temperature to create harmony? And in the demo I'll be releasing later this month, you'll see me do exactly that. By experimenting with these interactions, you'll bring more nuance, emotion and depth into your work, just as O'Keeffe does in hers. So we've explored colour relationships and temperature. Now let's look at another key element that shapes mood, colour saturation. Saturation refers to how intense or muted a colour is, and it can dramatically shift the emotion of a painting. Highly saturated colours, like bold reds, bright yellows and vibrant blues bring energy, excitement, and impact. They demand attention. In contrast, desaturated colours like soft greys, dusty blues, and muted earth tones bring a sense of subtlety, calm, or even melancholy. They create atmosphere, mystery, or a feeling of distance, like mist rolling over hills or the fading light of dusk. Mixing saturation levels in a painting creates contrast and helps guide the viewer's eye. A highly saturated focal point against a muted background instantly draws attention, while an overall low saturation palette creates a soft, dreamlike quality. Georgia O'Keeffe's Red Hills and White Flower is a perfect example of how high saturation creates impact. The deep, rich reds of the hills dominate the scene, evoking heat, intensity, and drama. Bright white flower in the foreground contrasts sharply with the saturated background, making it the clear focal point of the painting. The high saturation makes the landscape feel alive and full of energy. In contrast, Lake George leans towards a low saturated palette, creating a completely different mood. The soft blues, muted greens, and gentle greys create a calm, meditative atmosphere. Without strong contrast, the painting feels as if it exists in a dreamlike state. The hazy, desaturated tones in the background create a sense of distance and stillness, enhancing the painting's peaceful quality. Both paintings explore abstracted landscapes, but their differences in terms of colour saturation completely changes their emotional impact. So far, we've explored how colour influences mood, depth, and storytelling in abstract landscapes. But colour alone isn't enough. Composition is what gives a painting structure, guiding the viewer's eye and creating a sense of movement and balance. Even in abstract work, composition makes a painting feel intentional. It's what stops an artwork from feeling like a collection of random marks and instead makes it compelling, harmonious, and alive. Some abstract landscapes feel vast and open, while others feel intense and dynamic. That's not just about colour, it's about how elements are arranged. Composition in abstract landscape art isn't about following rigid rules, but about creating a dynamic visual experience through balance, movement, and rhythm. Nicolas de Stael's Paysage de Provence is a great example of how composition can be structured yet expressive. Known for his bold, simplified landscapes, he reduces the scene to blocks of colour and abstracted forms while still retaining the essence of place. The painting's composition is carefully arranged to balance stability with energy. Balance is created through strong horizontal divisions, which mirror the natural separations of land, sky, and fields. Despite the abstraction, these forms feel grounded and intentional, providing a sense of order. Movement comes from the layering of colour and brushstrokes, guiding the eye across the painting, from the foreground to the distant sky. The shifts in texture and shape add an underlying energy, keeping the composition from feeling static. Rhythm emerges in the repetition of rectangular forms, evoking the rolling fields and agricultural landscape of Provence. The structured yet expressive arrangement of shapes makes the painting feel like a distilled version of nature, capturing its essence without relying on literal detail. Composition in abstract landscapes isn't about copying reality, it's about organising space in a way that feels engaging and intentional. Balance keeps a painting from feeling chaotic or disjointed. Movement directs the viewer's eye through the composition, and rhythm creates energy and cohesion. As we explore these elements further, consider how you can use composition to create landscapes that feel both structured and expressive. One of the first things to consider in composition is balance, how different elements interact within the space. Balance isn't about making everything even. It's about creating a sense of harmony between colours, shapes, and textures. Some paintings feel steady and grounded, while others feel dynamic and full of movement. How balance is handled plays a huge role in achieving that effect. In Untitled by Joe Mitchell, balance is approached in a way that feels expressive rather than rigidly structured. Loose gestural brushstrokes create a sense of chaos at first glance. Yet an underlying order holds the composition together. The vertical division down the centre isn't accidental. Mitchell often worked in diptychs, using two canvases to form a single composition. Instead of disrupting the painting, the separation adds to its movement, encouraging the eye to travel across the space in a dynamic way. There are different ways balance can work in a painting. Symmetrical balance happens when elements are evenly distributed. This creates a sense of calm and order. Think of a horizon line splitting a painting equally, or colours mirrored on both sides. This kind of structure makes a piece feel stable and controlled. However, a perfectly symmetrical composition can feel static or overly balanced, lacking the natural movement that gives a painting energy. Asymmetrical balance, which is more dynamic, is at play in Mitchell's painting. One area carries more visual weight than another, creating a sense of movement and tension. The large, energetic brushstrokes clustered in certain areas keep the composition feeling alive, drawing the eye across the canvas in an engaging way. Balance isn't just about placement. It also comes from colour, contrast, and texture. In Untitled, bold, saturated strokes of blue and green are offset by areas of white space, preventing the painting from feeling too dense or overwhelming. The contrast between loose, expressive marks and softer, more open areas creates a balance between energy and stillness. In your work, consider how maybe a bold red section in a painting might feel balanced by a large, muted area elsewhere, or a dark, heavy form in one corner might need a lighter, more open space to avoid feeling too weighted down. Mitchell's work demonstrates this well. There's no strict symmetry, yet the composition feels intentional and cohesive. The goal is to create enough visual interest for a painting to feel whole without being unstable or disconnected. Beyond balance, a great composition also has a sense of movement. This is what gives a painting its energy and direction. It's how the viewer's eye travels through the piece rather than getting stuck in one spot. Think about how a winding path in a real landscape leads your gaze into the distance. Abstract landscapes work the same way. Movement creates a natural flow, inviting the viewer deeper into the painting. Turner's Wrecker's Coast of Northumberland is an excellent example of how movement transforms a composition. The painting captures the raw energy of the sea, with sweeping diagonal brushstrokes and dramatic contrasts, creating a sense of motion and urgency. Instead of a static scene, the composition feels in flux, pulling the viewer's eye across the turbulent waters and into the stormy sky. Now, there are several ways to create movement in a composition. Lines and brushstrokes can define how the eye moves. Turner's use of diagonal strokes speeds up the eye, making the waves and storm feel chaotic and powerful. In contrast, a painting with soft horizontal brushstrokes might feel gentle and expansive, slowing the viewer's experience. You can also use contrast and focal points with light and dark areas acting as visual pathways. High contrast in specific areas can create dynamic tension. Softer transitions make the movement feel more fluid and dreamlike. Movement in a painting can be subtle or dramatic. A stormy sky filled with sweeping, expressive strokes, like in Turner's work, makes the viewer feel the wind moving through the scene. A landscape with strong diagonal lines and high contrast might feel urgent and fast-paced, as if the land or water is shifting before us. Movement gives a painting energy, but rhythm is what keeps it engaging. It's the pattern repetition and pacing that makes a composition feel cohesive and immersive. Some abstract landscapes feel soft and meditative, while others feel bold and unpredictable. Rhythm plays a huge role in shaping that effect, and Emily Carr's Blue Sky is a great example. The painting is built on sweeping, curving forms that echo through the composition, creating a natural rhythm that makes the landscape feel alive. The repetition of sky and tree forms lead the eye through the painting, while variations in brushwork and tone keep it from feeling static. Rhythm is created by repetition. When shapes, brush marks, or colours appear multiple times, they create structure and rhythm. In Blue Sky, Carl repeats vertical brushstrokes that resemble rising trees and those curved lines for air currents, reinforcing movement and connection across the composition. Variation prevents predictability. Repetition alone can feel too rigid, so subtle shifts in size, tone, or direction keep the rhythm dynamic. Carl varies the thickness and direction of the brushstrokes. Some areas are densely packed, while others feel more open, allowing the rhythm to ebb and flow. Pacing creates contrast. Just like in music, a painting needs balance between busy, detailed areas and more open, quiet spaces. In Blue Sky, the sky itself serves as a pause in the rhythm. The bold, energetic forms in the lower part of the composition contrast with the beautiful softness of the sky, giving the painting breathing space while maintaining movement. Rhythm in abstract landscapes can take many forms. A series of vertical brush marks in different intensities might feel like trees swaying in the wind, much like Carl's expressive lines, or you could try dabs of colour repeated across the painting. A balance of repeated textured weighty areas with softer blended spaces can mimic the natural rhythm of the landscape. When rhythm is used well, it keeps the viewer engaged, guiding them naturally through the painting. It helps abstract landscapes feel alive, connected, and full of energy. So we've explored composition, how balance, movement, and rhythm shape an abstract landscape. But composition alone isn't enough to hold a painting together. There's one more essential element: value. Value is how light or dark an area is, and it plays a huge role in creating focus, depth, and dimension in a painting. Even when colour is removed, a painting should still feel structured. If the values aren't working, the whole composition can feel flat or unbalanced. Degas' Landscape on the Orne is a great example of how value alone can define a scene. Without relying on detailed forms, he builds the composition through contrasts of light and dark, creating a landscape that feels atmospheric and immersive. The deep, shadowed areas anchor the painting, while the lighter sections lead the eye through the open space, adding a sense of movement and depth. There are three key ways value shapes an abstract landscape: value and focus. Focus guides the viewer's eye, drawing attention to certain areas while allowing others to recede. In Landscape on the Orne, the interplay of dark foreground shapes against a luminous background directs focus and adds visual weight. Value and depth. Lighter and darker areas create a sense of space, making some parts of the painting feel distant while others feel closer. Degas' use of atmospheric perspective, where the background fades into softer, lighter tones, enhances the illusion of space despite the abstraction. And then we have value and dimension. Subtle value shifts can make a painting feel more layered. Degas builds form through tonal variation, allowing the landscape to emerge through light and shadow rather than define shapes. Understanding value helps us create abstract landscapes that feel grounded and intentional. Now that we understand how value shapes a painting, it's important to think about how to organise light and dark to create impact. This is called value hierarchy, the way values are arranged to lead the viewer's eye. High contrast, where dark and light are placed next to each other, creates a bold, energetic effect. It immediately pulls focus, making certain areas stand out. Mid-tone harmony, where everything stays within a similar range, gives a painting a soft, dreamy or misty quality. It creates atmosphere rather than drama. Milton Avery's Seagrasses and Blue Sea is a great example of how value hierarchy shapes the way a painting is experienced. The composition is divided into horizontal bands of colour, but it's the careful organisation of light and dark that pulls focus and guides the eye. There is a light expanse in the lower portion and a deep saturated blue sea in the upper half. This strong contrast in value immediately draws attention to the meeting point between land and water, creating a natural focal area. Within the sea, dark irregular shapes float across the surface. These deep forms contrast sharply against the blue water, guiding the eye across the composition. The sky, in a lighter blue band at the top, lighter than the sea, subtly softens the transition at the top, ensuring the viewer's gaze doesn't remain static, but instead moves between the elements. By controlling where the darkest and lightest values meet, Avery naturally leads the viewer's gaze across the canvas, proving that even in the most simplified of compositions, value remains a crucial tool for creating focus and movement. A great way to think about value is to ask yourself two simple questions. Where is the lightest light, and where is the darkest dark? These areas will naturally pull the eye first, acting as focal points. In abstract landscapes, value shifts can suggest depth without the need for realistic details. Light and dark values shape how space is perceived, creating a sense of distance, atmosphere, and weight within a composition. Lighter values tend to recede, feeling further away, much like mist or a distant sky. Darker values, on the other hand, create a sense of closeness, adding weight and dominance that ground certain areas of the painting. But depth isn't just about contrast between light and dark, it's also about edges. Soft, blended transitions between values create atmosphere and openness, suggesting fog rolling in or a vast distant horizon. High contrast edges, where dark and light meet sharply, add energy and impact, making certain areas feel more solid and immediate. Turner's Morning Amongst the Coniston Fells is a perfect example of how value can define space and movement. Instead of precise forms, Turner layers light and dark areas to create the illusion of land emerging from the mist. The soft transitions in the sky and background push those areas into the distance, while the darker foreground elements feel more present, anchoring the composition. The painting dissolves into layers of light, reinforcing the sensation of depth. Beyond focus and depth, value also helps create a sense of dimension, giving a painting structure and preventing it from feeling flat. Even in abstract work, shifting values suggest form, making a composition feel more layered and dynamic. Degas' Wheatfield and Line of Trees is a great example of how value can build structure within a painting. Instead of relying on clear details, Degas uses tonal shifts to shape the landscape. The darkest values anchor the trees, while the wheatfield is defined by a range of lighter tones that gradually fade into the background. The contrast between these areas creates a sense of depth. Gradients and transitions, where one value subtly shifts into another, help certain areas feel more three-dimensional. The soft blending of tones in the wheatfields creates a sense of movement, while the stronger contrasts in the trees give them a sense of weight and solidity. Thinking about value as a way to build structure helps guide the eye and create balance, making an abstract landscape feel more alive. By adjusting how values are distributed, a painting gains form and presence, even when the details are left undefined. We've covered a lot, from colour and composition to value and structure. So here's a simple way to bring everything together, a 3x3 framework that you can use to plan, assess and refine your abstract landscapes. Each column represents one of our three core pillars. Colour, how colour choices impact emotion and depth. Composition, how the painting is structured. And value, how light and dark shape the painting. Each row breaks this down into three key questions to ask yourself. You can use this framework before you start a painting, use it as a guide to help plan your painting, or use it midway through your painting. Step back and do a quick self-check, go through the questions, see what's working, what needs adjusting, and you can use it at the end for a final review to refine any last elements. Now, this isn't about following rigid rules. This is just about giving you a framework to stay intentional and help you build confidence in your choices. I've included this 3x3 painting checklist in your assignment PDF, and you can print it out if you like to use it as part of your painting process. So let's bring everything that we've covered together. At the core of a strong abstract landscape are three essential pillars: colour, colour relationships, temperature, and saturation that influence mood and energy; composition, balance, movement, and rhythm, giving the painting its structure; and value, focus, depth, and dimension, creating contrast, space, and form. Using the 3x3 framework, you now also have a practical guide to check in with your paintings before you start, midway through, and in your final review. In my demo on March the 10th, you'll see me apply this framework midway through the painting to assess what's working and what needs adjusting. The key to it all, though, is to stay intentional while allowing room for expression. Abstract landscapes aren't about following rules. They're about capturing a feeling, creating depth, and guiding the viewer's experience. Now that we've explored the core principles of colour, composition, and value, it's time to put them into action with this month's assignment. There's a separate download with the instructions and the 3x3 framework, but I'll go through it here too. So the challenge is all about working with a limited palette while still creating depth, contrast, and mood. You'll be using just 3 colours plus white, so be intentional about your choices. First, choose 3 colours that reflect the mood or energy you want to express. Then use white to mix variations in tone to add depth and contrast. Then pay attention to composition. Make sure there's balance, movement, and rhythm in your piece. But most importantly, in this assignment, don't overthink. This is about capturing the feeling of a landscape rather than focusing on exact details. Quick note about using black. You can if you want, but I challenge you to try creating depth and contrast first, using only your 3 colours and white. Experiment with mixing your deepest tones before using black. You may be surprised by the richness you can achieve. So, how to approach this assignment? Choose your 3 colours and think about how they interact. Will they create a bold contrast, or will they be more harmonious? Then consider composition and value before putting paint on the canvas. Midway, check in, step back and look at your work. Ask yourself, is the composition balanced? Does the use of value create depth and focus? Do the colours work together? If anything feels off, adjust as needed. And then the final review. Use the 3x3 framework one last time to check your piece. Refine any areas that need a final touch before calling it finished. That's it for the masterclass. So now it's time to take what you've learned and apply it in this month's assignment. And if you have any questions as you work through it, or about the masterclass itself, post them in the Q&A with Michelle category in the community. I'll be checking in there throughout the month and also answering questions in our live Q&A at the end of the month. I can't wait to see what you create. Happy painting!